So, guys, welcome back for another episode of the Red Line Podcast. Today, I am joined by Alex Chisnall. I have never met him before, so this is our first introduction to each other, but I've seen a couple of things about him, and he's met and worked with some significantly enormous influences. I think Stephen Bartlett, amongst a few others. Um, I'm really proud to have people that are very experienced and knowledgeable in this space. My job is to learn. So if you like this podcast, share, subscribe it, give it to your friends. And the objective is to take knowledge. If you are somebody getting into sales, starting a business, and you want the answers, you want the playbooks, but you can't afford it. Revenue isn't high enough right now. You don't have the mentors that you have to navigate through and know who's going to bullshit you and who's going to give you value. So I try to bring credible people to the show that can actually pave the way. And Alex, first thing we're going to ask is, who are you? What do you do? And why do you do it?
So Alex Chisnall. I've got a podcast called Screw It, Just Do It, which I've had for nearly 7 years. I run a podcast agency, which I think is my fourth or fifth business since finishing up with the Virgin Group. So I worked for Richard for 17 years with Atlantic, and then another 3-4 years with Virgin Startup, his not-for-profit.
Wow.
It's been an interesting reinvention over the years, my friend. Yeah.
Okay. And why do you do what you do?
Do I do because I absolutely love it. I love the audio space. I started off at BBC Radio Wales back after university a couple of decades ago. So I kind of feel I've come full circle back into this space. And along that way, I've embraced entrepreneurship. I love working with startups and entrepreneurs and helping people ultimately get to where they want to be in life. And I wouldn't want to be doing anything else. It's taken me many years to realize this, but yeah, I'm glad to be in the space I'm in.
So what was the pinnacle point? Like, what was that changing moment in your life where you were working at Virgin and you said, I've had enough. I don't want to do this. I want to do it for myself. What happened in your life?
Do you know what it was? It was actually working for Virgin Startups. I got reeled back into the Virgin Group after leaving Virgin Atlantic, and I was really enjoying what I was doing, working for Richard's not-for-profit, helping people get access to startup funding and mentoring. And at that point, I proposed them to launch a podcast. And at that point in time, I didn't know anything about podcasts. I just listened to a podcast called How I Built This, which I fell in love with. Which told the stories of, their successful businesses, be that Airbnb or Uber, some great, fantastic stories. And I went to them with this proposal. They said, run with it. So I went out, recorded 4 interviews, including one being Stephen Bartlett, who was the first person I ever interviewed, funnily enough. And it took them 3 months and 24 people to listen to, before they then said to me, right, you're going to get a call on Friday. We've approved it at Virgin Startup. It's now going to go to the Virgin Group. Then it's going to go to Virgin PR. And then it's going to go to senior management. And I literally had these 3 calls on a Friday throughout the whole day. It took hours. Literally go, it's been approved by the Virgin Group. It's been approved by Virgin PR. It's gone to the senior management. Right. What we'd like you to do is, we've got a similar idea to do exactly the same type of show. So could you go back, re-record all the interviews in a completely different style, with a completely different concept, and then we'll approve it. So I thought about this for 3 seconds maybe, and I just thought, wow, the Virgin Group behind me launching a podcast would be amazing, me being the host, all those connections. And then I thought, do you know what? I'm going to take a leaf out of my boss's book, which is called Screw It, Let's Do It. I'm going to call it Screw It, Just Do It, and launch it myself. That was the moment.
Mate, that is incredible. That is a fantastic story. Oh my God. All right. So a lot of things that I speak about in business, I feel have come from a term I use quite oftenly, which is accelerated learning. And for me, accelerated learning is failing extremely fast, but learning much quicker. And whether I go through thousands and thousands and thousands of failures, they give me hundreds of learnings that are pinpoint dead accurate. And that's where I've been able to. I'm a young guy, but I've been through, I feel, decades of experience through the trials and tribulations I created and set up for myself. So my biggest failures have really, really, really shaped my life. It's really shaped my future. For you, what was the biggest failure you've ever experienced in your life? Almost the rock bottom failure.
Yeah.
And it had a profound impact in how you changed your perspective and how you view life. Tell me about that failure.
It's a great question, and I totally agree with you. I was literally talking about this yesterday with a guy called Dan Murray-Serter, who's the founder of Heights, the brain care supplement company, who's one of his best friends is Stephen Bartlett, and we were just talking about that, how he's managed to literally fail so quickly prepared to do that with his own podcast to get it to #1 in Europe, you know. So for me, it was 100%, 100% definitely the first venture that I did after leaving Virgin Group, and that was retraining as a personal trainer. I was super enthusiastic about sport. I really enjoyed helping people, and I thought I would just put the two together and ultimately, you know, coach people to get better through the framework of sport, through different exercises. So I did that. I quickly learned to specialize in sports injury. I learned through an organization, again, that I didn't just need to be that hamster in the wheel, just working for myself, where I essentially bought my old job myself. And I was just paying, you know, being paid money for certain, you know, aspects of time. So I learned how to scale the business, and ultimately I learned by scaling it far too quickly. We opened our first clinic in the second busiest leisure centre in the UK, which was brilliant. I then got offered the opportunity to open multiple clinics under that group in other leisure centres. And then I got offered what I thought was a fantastic opportunity, which was to open another clinic in Sandbanks, near where I live in Poole in Dorset, which is one of the top 10, you know, most expensive areas to live in the UK. Sold this dream, yacht club, multiple practitioners, gym, restaurant, cafe, sounded amazing. What I didn't realize was opening in a place like that, I didn't do my homework. Friends who'd lived here far longer than me were telling me, you know, warning me about starting a business in a place like that. And I soon learned that for a business like this to succeed, you need regular customers. Yeah, it's a place like that.
Yes.
People don't live there 12 months of the year. They've got the second home in London. They've got the third home in Mallorca. They've got the fourth home in the Caribbean. So trying to run a business where people are only there for a very small block of time, maybe 3 or 4 months for the British summer, was super difficult. So cut a long story short, what I was doing was robbing Peter to pay Paul, you know, taking the money from the successful clinic, having to pay the multiple extra staff that I'd taken on with the triple rent compared to the original one. The 2 other clinics we had running just didn't have the footfall that the original one was getting. Before you know it, the whole thing literally crumbled around my ears. And I think, you know, valuable lesson there for me is, and for anybody listening, is knowing when to say stop, knowing when to quit. And I didn't know when to quit. I was too proud. And, you know, the lowest moment for that, Shane, was ultimately me being unable to not only pay the business bills, but pay the personal bills, and getting the knock on the door, the foot wedged in the doorway, the car parked in the driveway, going in front of my car, going, unless you pay this bill, I'm not moving my car from your driveway. And then having to explain to my wife why there was someone at their door with a foot in the door demanding payment. And that was a horrendous experience that I'd never wish it on anybody else. And I was quite bitter about that for a very long time, and really resented that whole episode of my life. But exactly what you said, I now look back on that and go, that was the best learning I could have had if I just just quit quicker if I just recognized that it wasn't working, not been so proud, asked for help, then I would have failed a lot quicker. Instead of dragging it out for a year, I could have, after 3 months, just realized this ain't happening. We need to pull out of this. But you think you know best.
It's very what's the word? It's very enlightening, number one, and it's very reassuring that I'm going through that right now. So January of this year, our second year of business, our accountant showed us we did triple-digit growth. 444% was the number.
Wow.
We grew by that much in our second year, and it was because my business partner was a fucking dynamite seller, absolute dynamite, incredible. And it came to December, January, and we started to figure out the market in fractional sales it's a very tacky place, a very tarnished place. And businesses who engage with reputable vendors, they see telemarketers, fractional sales firms as just a little, that little piece on the side of the luxury to have, making life easier. And I got to a point in January, February where revenue was going so far down that we were hemorrhaging cash, and the team was suffering in terms of I couldn't pay the salary.
Yeah.
I couldn't pay payroll. And I was telling them, look, go find a job. I'm happy if you leave. I understand. Go find a job because I don't know when this will fix. And I should have pulled the plug in March, but I kept it going beyond April, May, June. And then I finally got a big payment in July, which was good. But when you know how it goes, overnight. And my business partner, we had a discussion and we spoke about how much longer are you going to do this? You do realize you cannot scale this business. You do realize the reputation we are trying to achieve, we will never get it as fractional salespeople. He wanted to carry on. I moved away from it because my standards, and I'm not being arrogant, facetious in any way, but my standards of who I want to be seen as is somebody prestigious, premium, quality-based, respected. And typically that comes from the financial, banking, technology, equity, venture capital markets, that kind of arena. So you're absolutely right? Pulling the plug sooner is actually crucial to success. And from that failure, though, you must have got a big learning, whether it was directly related to that or a learning that, again, had a profound impact in your life and really shaped how you developed yourself today. It built your personality. What was that learning like?
Yeah, 100%. And it's definitely keeping your eye on the numbers is the biggest one. Thinking your bookkeeper, your accountant have got your back, your financial manager in the team has got your back. No, you as the business owner are ultimately responsible for what comes in and goes out of that business. And if you're not keeping a close enough eye, then you're to blame. And hindsight now, I 100% take that responsibility. But it's also reassuring, being a podcast host like yourself, guests I've had on the show. I remember Jamie Lang, who people know from Candy Kittens, is gourmet sweet brand, but they probably know him better from reality TV. Him sharing on my podcast, they didn't make payroll a whole bunch of times. And it was that phone call, him and Ed, his business partner, the night before, going, we are 40 grand in the hole. I haven't got 40 grand. What are we going to do? And then like you said, sometimes you'll get that big sale come in that morning that is meant to go out. And somehow you juggle it. I miss what me and my wife did. We juggled the credit cards around. Can you take 500 off this one, 10 grand off that one? You do it. It's horrible. It's horrible. And I would never want to be in that position again. So, many learnings, dude, many learnings, but, around staff and being honest with them and knowing how to treat them properly. But I think the biggest one from a business perspective is keeping your eye on the numbers. And as you know, cash flow is king. Cash is oxygen, and without that, you can't do shit. You can't breathe. You can't live.
You're dead. So, all right, let me ask you a question on this then. So, I wasn't able to make payroll, and I did speak to all my staff consistently. I always spoke to them and always told them what was going on. So much so, I even got the team around the table, around the Zoom call, to look at the financials, to look at the statements, to look at the numbers,
Good.
and say how should we, guys? Look, I've never done this before. Can we look at this together?
Yeah.
Where do you guys think we should? And the amount of productivity that took place, and really the discussion that was raised in terms of, do we need this, and hearing it from your teams it was quite refreshing, to say the least. But when the revenue didn't come for the right times that they needed, I had to pull the plug.
Yeah.
Then I became the bad guy. Yeah. I became you didn't fucking pay me. Yeah. One of them took me to tribunal court for £10,000. I was like, mate, where the hell did this £10,000 come from? Then, so I said, I'll give you £1. And he changed his offer completely. But I'm going through that. So how did you manage those situations? Did you have to manage those situations where you weren't able to fulfill on the last little bits of payroll? I haven't wound the company up yet because I still believe there's hope. But what do you do when you're in those situations? Because it seems like there's more than two people in this situation.
Yeah, and for me, it's thinking, and again, I think a great lesson is to diversify your revenue streams and not have all your eggs in one basket. And that was the case with me at the time. I'd actually started doing some work with Virgin Startup started off as a mentor with them, and then a part-time business advisor, and then they'd asked me to go full-time as a business advisor, and I'd said, no, this is perfect for me. I'm just doing a few hours whilst I'm growing my own business. And then I was like trying to think laterally, thinking, how the hell can I pull some more money in here in a relatively short period of time? So I literally switched my focus, went full-time with Virgin Startup. That ultimately led to them, unbeknown to me until they told me it had gone before the board, that I'd become their number one business advisor there, so that they then asked me if I'd become a delivery partner. And I basically took over everywhere territory-wise, from Liverpool all the way down to Brighton, and looked after that for them. So again, I was able to start scaling and having different business advisors working under me in all the different regions in the UK. I think we had about 9 counties or something like that. So, it didn't happen overnight, but, having those conversations with those people that you owe money and coming to a plan, again, ultimately they want to help you because they want to get their money back. So if you can offer something, you can kind of structure it and show them how you're going to do it, then that's ultimately, what I did. And it was just that massive learning of going, how am I going to pull this money out from somewhere? And now knowing, especially having been through, a pandemic and seeing lots of other people struggle with that situation. And again, that was another learning. We struggled with that. Every client from the podcast agency disappeared in 30 days, except one client who kept us going throughout the whole thing. All those marketing departments.
Wow.
You couldn't even have a conversation with someone. Email was just auto direct. So, and we're working with some big companies, bizarrely, the biggest zoo in Western Europe, right through to the biggest provider of shared office space, and all those businesses. No one was going to the zoo, and no one was renting offices anymore. So all of a sudden you're like, I understand why you're not replying to my emails, but it doesn't help me out. So, had met, like yourself, many ups and downs, and it is that bloody roller coaster ride that we all refer to. It is.
I love it. Well, look, we are at 3:05. I know you did say you have a call, so what we can do is we can pause now. There's 2 more pieces, which is a message to your 18-year-old self, a growth hack, or a process system, something the audience can use today and see a result in a week, and then where to find you. So do you want to pick up the second half after your call, or do you want to finish it now? It's up to you.
Let's do it now. So they said they can make 4:45, so I'll put 4:45, and I will speak to them then, and I'll carry on this because this is good.
All right, good. Well, thank you for that. All right, so
there we go.
Okay, so conversations, when you do get into those moments, a lot of people, I believe, are going to start companies now that we are shifting from a day and age where people had to go to the office. I know they're trying to drive that. They're trying to drive that still again and get people into the office environment, because collaboratively and productivity does go through the roof. I truly believe that. But there is going to be a shift. And I see, even myself, I saw the opportunity to say, I can do this by myself. I used to call companies. Who the hell is business review webinars? They didn't know who the hell I was. So I said, they're getting 10% of my money. I want the whole thing. So let me go get the whole thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they will start getting their businesses. They need to learn these tricks. They need to learn that there's going to be failure. They need to learn that there are lessons in those failures.
True.
So if a young 18-year-old is curious about business, he's saying, I want to go to college, but there's this big world of business that I've been hearing. And I saw this podcast with Alex Chisnall, and I saw it was Shane. Now, you are going to go back however many years till you're 18. I'm sure it's only 5 years ago. But you're going to go back to yourself when you were 18. You're going to be you right now. He's going to be sitting on a bench, and you're going to sit right next to him, and you're going to say, hey, dude, I'm you in X amount of years. I'm here to tell you one thing. That one thing is going to get you to where I am today in half the time. But you have to do this one thing. You can't tell him to buy Bitcoin because somebody said do that, and that was incredible. Or Ethereum.
True.
Or Apple. You got to give him the roadmap, but in one form. What's the roadmap to success for Alex to become you in half the time?
It's a really good question, and I think to get there in half the time, you simply it's not simple, obviously, doing this, but simply finding somewhere who's walked in your shoes, who's gone to where you want to get to, and getting them to help you ultimately. And it's easier said than done, but in that respect, you can have mentors, you can have coaches, and those mentors can be people whose books you've read, whose courses you've taken, whose seminars you've been to. But trying to do it on your own, which I've tried to do, I think 4 times now, solo founder, as you said, collaboration is the way forward. So for me, it's finding somebody who's walked in your shoes, has gotten to where you want to be, and is probably, I don't know, at least a couple of years ahead of where you want to get to. They're not just one step beyond where you want to get to. They're a few steps beyond. So they've got that advice, they've got that rounded experience, they've got that overview. They've got the roadmap. They can give you the roadmap, and then it's just a numbers game. Approaching those people to see if they can help you. I've done that. I've gotten help in that regard. And a great way, as you'll know, is getting them on your podcast and asking. When I went to start a podcast, I wanted to speak to those people who'd been super successful. So I had interviews with Lewis Howes. I had interviews with Chris Ducker, Pat Flynn. These guys who'd grown, top 100 podcasts under any category in the world. And I was amazed 7 years ago they were willing to speak to me, but ultimately, persistence and consistency always wins the race. And if you ask enough times, it will come back round. Lewis Howes took me a year, but it took a year. And when he was launching another book, he wanted to do a book tour. He wanted to speak on every podcast he could. That's when he came back to me. So that is the way forward, I feel.
Man, that is incredible. Lewis Howes, Stephen Bartlett, all of those are my top dogs. Oh my God. We're going to have to talk about how you did that, because I want that playbook.
Okay.
So, so Alex, as we wrap up the show, I want my audience, my guests, I want them to have something they can execute with immediately. You always hear people do this. They'll give you just enough, and then they're like, "Oh, but if you pay $29.99, they'll give you the rest." Right?
Yeah.
So we know what that is about. there is value out there. I will not discredit anybody who creates those things. However, there are things that you can execute on today. I've shared a number of, I think, 15 different growth hacks through all the episodes, multiplied with every guest who shows a growth hack. For Alex Chisnall, before we get into that growth hack, in terms of these two top three, prospecting, discovery and negotiation, closing, which of the three is most important to you when starting, running, and growing a business?
Prospecting, closing, and
prospecting, discovery and negotiation, and closing.
I think if you're starting out and you're the, again, 18-year-old Alex or 18-year-old Alexis that's listening to this podcast now, I would say it has to be closing, because getting that first sales in the door is absolutely crucial. Give you the inspiration to carry on, covers your overheads, maybe gives you some more money to invest in the company, make that first hire, invest in some marketing. Yeah, that's what I would go for every time.
What's going to be the hack that you've used to close people for your business that has worked in the most effective way? And you can't just say, give me your checkbook, or do you want to sign here? What is your tactic? How do you get them to sign that contract?
Yeah, great question. So I think, and I'm sure you'll back me on this, I think in this day and age, everybody needs to embrace a form of content creation, be that a vlog, a blog, a podcast, etc., etc. For me, and I only realized this accidentally in hindsight, was looking at, where our leads came from. And ultimately, a huge percentage of those leads came from the podcast, because you'd have a conversation with somebody. By the end of that conversation, hopefully they should know, like, and trust you. As well as knowing, liking, and trusting, depending on the questions that you ask, obviously, where they need help, where their struggles are, what their challenges are. And ultimately, you can be that person to help them. And for example, they might be struggling with sales. Okay, well, I've got this amazing podcast closing system, and it literally will guarantee that if you target the people you want to have a conversation with, you can convert them to your business. So for me, that was huge, and that is genuinely what we do with our clients. It's like, yes, there's a personal brand play, yes, there's a brand awareness play, there's all these things, but ultimately the biggest mistake most people are missing with their podcast is turning it into a lead generation machine and closing those deals after the podcast finishes. Continuing that conversation for 10 minutes afterwards, sending them an email. And ultimately, you're not going to close 100% of those guests you have in your podcast, but you've positioned yourself as the expert in that field. And given the network, as you'll know, get from having a podcast, you'll be able to point them in the direction of those people who can help them. So it puts you in a good light. You might have some affiliate deals that you've gotten with these other people as well, so you're all getting something from it. But for me, I would embrace this world that is just growing and growing, this content creation space. You see TikTok launching their own podcast app, YouTube are about to switch from beta testing their podcast platform in the US to bring it here to the UK.
Wow.
I just think embrace that. For me, use it as a closing system. 100% works. I wouldn't say it if I hadn't done it myself. So it's genuinely, for people who grew up with social media, it should be a relatively natural thing as well, far more so than when I started out,
Of course. Well, look, I think there is tons of value that you've been able to share on this episode, and I really appreciate more than anything in this world. Alex, where do people find you? Where do they come to get your information and get your services?
Yeah, so podcast is called Screw It, Just Do It. Find that anywhere you can listen to podcasts, launching on YouTube in October. At Alex Chisnall on all social media, be that LinkedIn, Instagram, or you can always email alex@screwitjustdoit.org.
Well, look, thank you very much again for showing up on the show. I wish you an amazing day. I do hope to have you on the show again. And guys, reach out to Alex. You can see he's a plethora of information. And I will see you next week for another episode.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Stay on for 1 minute. Let me just